The night had settled over Southbridge like a heavy coat, thick, humid, and full of the kind of quiet that warned you not to trust it. The neon sign above Murphy's bar flickered weakly, buzzing in protest against the stillness. Inside, the dim yellow light fell over scratched tables, sticky floors, and the kind of regulars who'd long since stopped pretending they came for anything other than the cheap whiskey and the comfort of familiarity. Jamal and Marcus pushed through the door, one after the other, drawing a brief gust of cold air in with them. For a second, the bar went quiet. The two brothers exchanged a look, one that said they'd felt this before, in 100 small towns that didn't take kindly to outsiders. But this wasn't just any kind of cold welcome. There was a charge in the air, something darker, heavier. The kind of silence that hides violence just beneath its surface. They'd both spent years in places where silence was deadlier than noise. Jamal had learned to hear danger in the way people stopped talking, in the slight shift of boots on the floor. Marcus, older by 3 years and once a recon specialist, noticed the glances, how 3 men at the corner table stopped playing pool, how another by the jukebox leaned back with his drink and watched them like a wolf considering its next move. "Looks like we're popular already," Jamal muttered under his breath. Marcus smirked faintly. "Yeah, small town hospitality." They walked up to the bar counter, the wood worn smooth from decades of spilled beer and angry fists. The bartender, a gray-haired man with a face like cracked leather, eyed them cautiously. "What'll it be?" "2 beers, Marcus said simply, his tone polite but even. His voice carried the calm steadiness of a man who'd led patrols through gunfire. The bartender nodded slowly and turned around, but the pause before he moved was noticeable, like he had to think about whether he wanted to serve them or not. Behind them, the murmur of conversation had started again, though softer, as if the bar itself was whispering about them. Jamal shifted his stance, his back to the wall now, where he could see the room clearly. Habit. He hadn't been in uniform for over a year, but some instincts never left. His eyes flicked from table to table, cataloging exits, counting heads, noting who looked drunk, who looked sober, and who looked dangerous. The men in the corner, 4 of them, broad-shouldered, their hands rough and scarred, fit all 3 categories. Marcus caught his brother's glance and gave a small nod. "Relax," he said softly. "We're not here for trouble." "Yeah," Jamal answered, "but trouble might be here for us." The bartender slid 2 beers across the counter, foam spilling down the sides. Marcus thanked him with a nod, dropped a 20 on the bar, and turned slightly, enough to keep the room in view. He could feel eyes on them. Always could. He'd been stared at by warlords, mercenaries, and corrupt officers before, but somehow, the raw, unfiltered hate in this small bar cut deeper. A few minutes passed. A song crackled through the old jukebox, some country tune about heartbreak and cheap whiskey. The brothers drank in silence, letting the tension hang, pretending it didn't bother them. But Jamal's knuckles tapped rhythmically against the glass, a subtle outlet for his restlessness. Then came the voice. "Look what the wind blew in," someone drawled from the corner. A low laugh followed. Another man muttered something that made the group chuckle. Marcus didn't turn. He didn't need to. He knew their type. Men who thought cruelty was a sport. Jamal's eyes flickered toward them, and the grin that followed wasn't friendly. "You wanna handle that?" he murmured. Marcus took a slow sip of his beer. "Nah, not yet." The sound of boots scraping against the floor broke through the laughter. One of the men had stood up. He was tall, thick-armed, his neck reddened from years in the sun, and his grin carried all the arrogance of someone who thought numbers guaranteed victory. He sauntered closer, his voice rising so the whole bar could hear. "Ain't seen you boys around before. You lost." Marcus finally looked at him, calm, collected, unreadable. "Just passing through." The man stepped closer, close enough that Jamal could smell the cheap bourbon on his breath. "Yeah, well, maybe you oughta keep passing. Folks around here don't like strangers. Especially the kind that don't belong." The bar went deathly silent again. Jamal felt the old rush start up in his veins, that steady drumbeat before a fight. But Marcus's quiet voice cut through it like a knife. "We don't want trouble," he said evenly. "Just a drink." The man laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Then you should have picked a different town." A glass shattered behind them, whether by accident or warning, no one could tell. The brothers turned slightly, now both fully alert, muscles coiled. Jamal exhaled slowly, a grin creeping across his face. Guess it's one of those nights. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his voice low and almost amused. You take left or right? Jamal's grin widened. Left's always been my side. The man in front of them never saw the flicker of readiness in their eyes, the kind that only came from years of surviving chaos. He thought he was picking a fight with two men out of place. He had no idea he was standing inches from two of the most dangerous soldiers alive. The first punch came fast, but Jamal was faster. The man barely raised his arm before Jamal caught his wrist, twisted it, and sent him crashing into a table with the efficiency of muscle memory. The sound of splintering wood and shattering glass tore through the bar, followed by stunned silence. For half a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Two of the men from the corner lunged forward. Marcus stepped into their path, moving with the quiet precision of a predator. One swung a pool cue, and Marcus sidestepped, catching the man's momentum and slamming an elbow into his ribs. The second man rushed from the side, but Marcus dropped low, sweeping his leg out. The thug hit the ground with a dull thud, gasping for air. Jamal, meanwhile, had his own dance partner. The man he'd thrown tried to get up, blood running down from a gash on his forehead. You're dead, he spat, staggering forward. Jamal caught him by the collar, eyes cold. You first. He drove his fist into the man's gut, then shoved him backward into the wall. The impact rattled the pictures hanging behind him. The rest of the bar seemed frozen in disbelief. The bartender ducked behind the counter, muttering prayers. The jukebox kept playing, absurdly cheerful country music that turned the whole scene into something surreal. Marcus, Jamal said, glancing over his shoulder as another man charged him with a broken bottle, remind me why we don't go to fancy places. Marcus caught the bottle mid-swing, twisted it out of the man's grip, and sent him sprawling with a quick strike to the neck. Because fancy places don't serve this kind of entertainment, he said calmly, tossing the bottle aside. In less than 30 seconds, the bar looked like a battlefield. Chairs overturned, beer dripping from the counter, and 4 men groaning on the floor. The rest of the patrons pressed themselves against the walls, too afraid to intervene, too fascinated to look away. Jamal wiped a smear of blood from his knuckles. We good? Marcus glanced around, scanning for movement. Yeah, he said, for now. Then came the sound of clapping. Slow, mocking, from the far end of the room, near the back door. A tall, lean man stepped into view, cigarette glowing faintly between his fingers. His blonde hair was slicked back, and his grin was the kind that carried trouble. Well, he said, his voice smooth but laced with venom. Didn't expect to see anyone in here who could actually fight back. Jamal's eyes narrowed. You their boss? The man chuckled. Something like that. Name's Rick. These boys, he gestured to the men groaning on the floor, they're not the brightest, but they know how to follow orders. Usually. Marcus's posture shifted slightly, his weight balanced, not aggressive, but ready. You gonna give them another order? Rick took a long drag of his cigarette, exhaled, and flicked the ash to the floor. Not tonight. I think we've all learned something here. His tone was casual, but his eyes glittered with anger, not the hot, reckless kind, but the cold, dangerous one that plans revenge. You boys just made yourselves a problem in this town. Jamal stepped forward, his voice steady. Then maybe it's the town that's got a problem. Rick's smirk widened. See, that's where you're wrong. You're passing through. Me, I live here. I run things here. You'll be gone before long. Everyone always is. He turned, walking toward the back door, but paused halfway and looked over his shoulder. Word of advice. Don't be here tomorrow night. Some people don't forgive easy. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving the bar steeped in uneasy silence. Jamal exhaled, the adrenaline fading. Guess that's it for a quiet drink. Marcus took another look around, assessing the damage. You broke a chair, he said. You broke 2 guys, Jamal shot back. Marcus's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. Fair point. They dropped a few bills on the counter, more than enough to cover the beer and maybe a new table, and stepped outside. The cool night air hit them like a wake-up call. The street was empty, the neon lights of the bar flickering weakly behind them. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Jamal glanced up at the stars, his breath visible in the chill. Think he'll come after us? Marcus didn't answer right away. He was looking down the dark road, where the night stretched on endlessly, full of quiet threats and invisible eyes. Yeah, he said finally. He will. Guys like that always do. Jamal cracked his neck, a grin spreading slowly. Good. I hate unfinished business. Marcus gave a short laugh. You're impossible. Just prepared. They started walking, boots crunching softly on gravel. To anyone watching, they looked like two ordinary men heading home after a bar fight. But there was nothing ordinary about them. Every step, every glance, carried the precision of years spent surviving in places where one mistake meant death. Neither of them noticed the black pickup parked across the street, headlights off, engine idling. Inside, Rick watched them through the windshield, his jaw tight, a thin smile curling his lips. He flicked away his cigarette and muttered, "We'll see how tough you are when the whole pack comes for you." As the brothers disappeared into the darkness, the night around Southbridge seemed to shift, quieter, heavier, and full of the promise that this fight was only beginning. The morning after the bar fight dawned gray and tense. A low mist hung over the town, clinging to the cracked pavement and boarded windows like it didn't want to let go. Jamal stood outside the small motel where he and Marcus had crashed for the night, sipping bitter coffee from a paper cup. He hadn't slept much. Every sound, a car door slamming, footsteps in the hall, had set his instincts twitching. Years of training had wired him to expect retaliation, and Southbridge felt like a place that didn't let grudges die easily. Marcus emerged from their room, already dressed, eyes scanning the street the way he used to scan enemy terrain. "You feel it too?" he asked quietly. Jamal nodded. "Yeah, they're coming. Just a matter of when." Marcus didn't respond right away. He leaned against the railing, arms folded. "We could just leave. Let them have their little kingdom." Jamal gave a humorless laugh. "After last night, you really think they'll just let us walk away?" Marcus sighed. "No, but I had to ask." They both knew the truth. The moment that fight started, there was no going back. Rick had looked at them like a man who didn't lose often, and worse, like one who wouldn't accept the idea of losing to men like them. That kind of hate didn't fade, it festered. The brothers packed up quickly, but before they could leave, the first sign of trouble appeared, a black pickup rolling slowly down the street, the same one they'd noticed the night before. Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Guess we don't have to wait long." The truck stopped across from the motel. 3 men stepped out. Not Rick, but his kind of people. Bulky, confident, stupid. One of them carried a shotgun casually over his shoulder, like he thought it made him invincible. Marcus set down his duffel bag, his voice calm but firm. "Stay behind me." Jamal grinned. "Yeah, sure, like old times." The first man sneered as they approached. "You boys made a mess last night." "Yeah," Jamal replied, his tone flat. "We noticed." The man's grin widened. "Rick wants a word." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Tell Rick he can come say it himself." That wiped the grin off his face. "You think you're tough? This ain't the army, boy. You're outnumbered here." Marcus's eyes didn't waver. "You're right, but I'm still giving you one chance to walk away." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the man with the shotgun lifted it, and the brothers moved like lightning. Jamal ducked to the left, sweeping the legs out from the nearest thug, while Marcus drove forward, grabbing the shotgun before it could level. A swift strike with the butt of the weapon dropped its owner flat. The third man, panicked, swung wildly with a crowbar. Jamal caught his arm mid-swing, twisted, and sent him crashing into the hood of the truck. The metal groaned under the impact. The fight was over before it really started. Marcus looked around, breathing steady, his mind already racing ahead. "This won't stop them. Rick's testing us. Then he's gonna regret it," Jamal muttered, tossing the keys from the truck into the gutter. They didn't stick around. Within minutes, they were on the move, heading toward the outskirts of town. Marcus knew Rick would regroup, and he knew the kind of man who hid behind followers. A coward, but a dangerous one. Someone who used fear like a weapon. As they drove, the tension between them hung thick. "You sure about this?" Jamal asked finally. "We could disappear." "You know we can." Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. "We've been disappearing our whole lives, Jay." "Not this time." The words settled between them like stone. Jamal nodded slowly. Then we finish it. By noon, they'd tracked down where Rick operated, an old warehouse on the edge of town, long abandoned, now humming with activity. 2 trucks parked outside, men moving in and out. It was almost nostalgic. The setup reminded them of raids overseas. Different country, same kind of scum. They parked a few blocks away and approached on foot. Jamal crouched behind a rusted fence, peering through a gap. 5 outside, maybe more inside. Marcus nodded, calculating angles, distances. We go silent, quick. Jamal smirked. Silent as a grenade. The brothers moved like shadows. One by one, the men outside went down. A quick chokehold, a strike, a takedown. No guns fired, no noise beyond the soft thuds of bodies hitting the dirt. Inside, Rick sat in an office lit by a single bulb, a cigarette dangling from his lips as he barked orders into a phone. He didn't hear the door creak open until Marcus spoke. Rick. The voice was quiet, but it froze him mid-sentence. He turned slowly, cigarette trembling slightly between his fingers. The 2 brothers stood in the doorway, calm, collected, lethal. Rick forced a laugh. You don't know who you're messing with. Marcus took a step closer. No, you don't. Jamal's voice was softer, almost amused. You should have just let us finish our drinks. Rick's bravado cracked then. He reached for the gun on his desk, but Marcus was faster. In a single motion, he disarmed him and pinned him against the wall. Here's how this goes, Marcus said, his tone icy. You leave us alone, and your men do the same. Otherwise, next time, we won't be this polite. Rick tried to sneer, but fear had crept into his eyes. He nodded once, shallow, quick. Marcus let him go. Jamal leaned close, whispering, and if we see that truck again, we won't talk first. They walked out without another word, leaving Rick shaking in the dim light. Outside, the brothers stood under the gray sky, the mist lifting at last. Jamal exhaled slowly. Think that's the end of it? Marcus looked out toward the horizon, where the clouds were breaking just enough for a sliver of sun. Maybe not, but it's enough for now. They turned and started walking, side by side, 2 soldiers out of uniform, carrying the quiet strength of men who'd seen too much and survived it all. And somewhere behind them, Southbridge learned a lesson it would not soon forget. Some men you should never mistake for easy targets.